the conversation right now that we want to have is, why are we even talking about this at all? Why does this matter? Why are we here talking about Black angels? So I would love both Janelle and Gina, if you can just tell us, why are you involved in this? Why is this of interest? Gina, why don't you start us off?
I'm happy to. Well, for me, a couple different reasons why I'm interested in this space. One is professionally. For the last 10 years, I've been working in low-income communities to provide financing to mostly real estate projects, because the bank has a regulatory responsibility to do so. And it's been a labor of love in a lot of ways. I've worked on a lot of projects that I'm very happy about, very impactful projects in our communities. But I acknowledge that even in that space, in that house, there are lots and lots of parts of the market that we'll never fund. It's not the right house, and yet there is such a great need. And so for me, at 50 something years old at this point, it's about legacy, and it's about leaving the place better than you found it. And so I have a personal interest, particularly around closing the wealth gap in this country that exists amongst African Americans versus everybody else. And a part of that passion for me is, how can I work to start closing that gap? I believe Black women are the way forward. I believe Black women have always been the way forward. And we're starting businesses at a faster rate. We're better educated than many of the other demographics. And so I think, it's, if not us, then whom? I think the other thing that I wanted to mention is, there are a couple of people on the call here from Citi. We did our best to build community at that bank amongst Black women in particular. And about some years ago, I don't know, I reached out to a handful of the women, and I just sent everybody an email and said, if you had an opportunity to invest $5,000 to $10,000 in some Black female-led companies or owned companies, would you be interested? And every single person got back to me and said, yeah, I don't know where to start. I don't know where to get in, but I would absolutely have an interest. I think that's the right thing to do. And so for me, this is an opportunity to sort of bring together my community and provide growth or closing that wealth gap. So again, I think that, it's just where I think I can fit into the space.
I think you just answered all my questions that I was going to ask in that one opening.
Sorry.
Thank you. But we've talked about this so much though, so I know there's a lot of passion there. Janelle, why is this important for you? And you're coming at this from a little different angle.
Yeah. So after selling SuperData, it was the name of my gaming data startup, to Nielsen, someone said to me, isn't that exciting? You're one of like 30 Black females who've exited to a Fortune 500 company. And I thought, that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. I didn't think that was exciting at all. I don't want this to be a small club. It should be a lot bigger, particularly when you look at that, the group of Black exited females, the internal metrics tend to be better. So I'm not really sure what the problem, I thought, what's the problem? And the problem is there's not a lot of resources at the beginning.
So let's go back to that, the resource issue. And a lot of people think of capital, as the primary resource. But you've talked a lot about your board and the people that you had around you. Talk a little bit about how that really made a difference for you and helped to level the playing field.
So I had worked at a company called Buzzmetrics that, before it was called social media, it was called consumer generated media. And that business got acquired by Nielsen. And, if you've met me in person, I'm a pretty aggressive, bold person. So I went to the co-founders and I said, I thought that was amazing and I got some money. Why don't you teach me how to do that on my own? And then they actually ended up joining my board at Superdata and sat in the room with me while I was negotiating with Nielsen. It wouldn't have been done without them, and it wouldn't have been done without me approaching them to get that kind of assistance.
Mm-hmm. Gina, a lot of people talk about banks. Like, we hear that in the media all the time that, the banks are not lending, what the banks are not doing. Why are banks just really not the answer?
Well, on a couple different reasons. I don't know to say that banks are not the answer. I think banks can be a part of the answer, but they certainly can't be the answer by themselves. Most of them, if you're not talking about community banks, you're talking about the larger bulge bracket banks, they are looking for repeat business with very large clients. They are looking to mitigate risk. They're looking at more later stage investment opportunities. They're not going to be that first mover. They're not going to be the first money in. And so mostly for those reasons, when we look at launching a new product, it's with the understanding that all of the resources that are going to be required to set that product up in the institution are going to create a platform that we're going to be able to replicate business over and over and over again. And I think these types of companies at the very early stage may not lend themselves to that type of investing or lending.
So thinking back to the graphic that we showed last week about the PayPal mafia and how you're in it and it's truly a club. I'd like each of you just to comment very briefly on how you've seen that manifest. Gina, in real estate.
Oh boy, I mean, real estate it's a club business. It's a mentored business. If you do not know people, you can sniff around the industry for all of your career and never have an opportunity to actually be sitting at the table. It very much is a closed industry that requires some sort of somebody bringing you in and somebody mentoring you through. So that's just a reality of, and particularly in the markets where, again, I think the greatest amount of opportunity exists in like New York, Chicago, DC. Those markets are very advanced staged, and you really have to come in. You really have to be mentored in order to get in.
And Janelle, now being a founder who has exited, you've gotten the door open for you a little bit. Tell us what you've seen.
It's insane. We raised venture capital maybe about a year before we exited, and I'll just you'll get emails like, hey, this company is looking for too little money for us to be interested, but I think it looks good, maybe you want to throw in some money. And you're just like, where does that come from? And then who's going to be on the board, because it's going to be this person's friend and that person's friend. And like I said, with having our board with two people who started a business acquired by Nielsen, they literally called our chairman and said, we're going to ease up on the due diligence during acquisition because you're like, we know it's fine. Like, you're on the board, we know everything's going to be okay. So it is so, I use the word incestuous, like it's just a dollar being passed around between a small group.
And how many of us are in that group to getting dollars passed?
Oh, when I look around, there's me.
Right. And to that same point, how many of us, and then who's willing to take the risk on us? Because for some reason, when we're not familiar, I think that lends itself to even more of a sense of, I'm not sure I know. If I don't know, I don't understand, I'm not sure I can take that risk. It feels that much more risky just because we're not familiar.
I'm not sure who took a look, and read through the technical note, but there were a couple places where I highlighted in the reading that we sent around that showed where there are points where there's bias inherent. There was one comment, where is it? Where the person said, it was something about the team. Oh, it was a reference to a gut feel. You know, you don't know, it's a gut feel, and you just kind of know. And to me, you know, as soon as I read that, I said, oh, it says, I go with my gut on whether it is a good bet or not. The due diligence will only take you so far, and then you have to use judgment based on experience, right? So if your experience is all people who look like you, that gut, generally, if there's someone who doesn't look like you on the other side, your gut's not going to respond so well, right?
You know, this is a very simplistic, and it's one example. It's not meant to kind of be used for everything. But there was a gentleman in my group who was hired by a friend of his, who was our boss. And when he came in, I asked the question, oh, what does he know about this industry? And the gentleman said to me, he's smart, he can learn anything. Well, so are we. But I don't know that somebody's that willing to take that chance.
Janelle, how has your exit impacted your family and your community? What difference has that made?
Oh my gosh. So I have 5 nephews and 1 niece, and they all have a trust fund now. And so they won't take on any college debt if and when they want to go to college. They'll, you know, if they want to use it to buy a house or, I mean, that is, you know, I don't want to do too much because you have to work, but, you know, that's life-changing. You know, think about getting to college and just being able to go where you want to go and not look at the price tag, or being able to buy a home and then, you know, building up your personal wealth. It's, I mean, I wasn't coming from a wealthy family. Like I didn't have that. So that's a huge game changer for my family.
You want a trust fund baby, Janelle?
That's exactly what I don't want.
I don't know. I just thought, you know, everyone on this line, you know. So can both of you just close with some final thoughts on, you know, how you feel like this impacts that wealth conversation that so many of us have been having for so long, but for some reason we're just not seeming to move the needle very far. And, you know, just give your final thoughts on why this is so important.
Well, and I said this, I don't remember and I don't want to, this is not my quote, I took this from somebody else, but a colleague, woman that I met, made the statement that we are philanthropists. We just don't call it that we give at church, we give at the bake sale, we give here, we give there. But are we conscious about what we're doing? Are we doing it with purpose? Are we doing it with direction? Are we doing it with intention? And I think to the extent that you have a sense, you have an opinion about what needs to be done in this country or how you can be helpful, that's where, you know, again, for me, it's about legacy. And so to the extent that you're purposeful about it, that you kind of thought intentionally, this is where I need to be, this is the thing that I think I can do in my space, that there's a great opportunity for that. So I think that would be my reason to get involved, because I think this is an asset class that we understand. There's a need, we understand it, and if not us, then who?
Thank you. And Janelle?
I mean, I think the game is really won at the beginning. When you have a Black female founder who has to do things at night and on the weekends and has a full-time job and other people in her family to support, there's just no way that that's going to have the kind of scale as somebody who can focus on something full-time for a year and a half and not worry. And so that's really where the playing field gets leveled at the very, very beginning.
And I think that you can extrapolate that to say that if you don't have the friends and family money, if you don't have the angel money, you don't often have the luxury to do that. And so, you know, that's really why we're here talking about this. While there's certainly conversation warranted about what we're not getting as far as VC money or bank money from, you know, the graphic that we saw last week, the majority of capital for businesses is not coming from those sources. It's coming from the personal savings, which we know the story with that. It's coming from friends and family money. It's coming from angel money, from crowdsourced resources. So that's why we're focusing on this. So thank you, Janelle and Gina, for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.